My grandma wants to take our apartment after my dad's passing. This ended up a lot longer than I wanted, so if you take the time to read this, thank you. Also, English is not my native language, so sorry for any errors. Even before I was born, my entitled grandmother has hated my mom. My parents often told me how they were almost homeless when I was born. When my dad brought her to his apartment, my grandma immediately wanted her gone, but my dad fought with her and in the end went to live with my mom's side of the family. When I was born, my grandma didn't know for 3 days until she somehow found out, so she begged my dad to come back with her grandson. But he only accepted on the condition she leaves and lets my mom live in the apartment. My grandma very aggressively agreed, and her and my grandpa bought a house in the suburbs close by. Now on to the things I remember. When I was growing up, she would usually say some mean remarks towards my mom's side of the family, like critique their driving, apartment, and my aunt's kid. I always thought it was rude or mean, but I was a kid then. She stopped when I was around 10. When I was 8, my grandpa unfortunately passed away in his sleep. He was a sweet and kind and put up with my grandma's BS about my mom's side of the family, but ever since then she has gotten more and more lonely. I understand she is lonely and wants company, but what she does is, in my opinion, inexcusable. She started calling us daily asking if me and my dad could come and help her with renovation and work in the garden. My dad knew she was lonely, and even though he didn't like spending time with her, he decided to go and drink beer and smoke with her and whatever else they were doing because she was his mother, but sometimes he would go into fights with her and come back complaining. I was never informed what those arguments were about, but sometimes when I was with him working I would hear my mom's name mentioned and how she was manipulating my dad. He would argue with her, they would cut contact for 3 days, and then he goes to work on the house again. And the cycle would repeat until December last year. My dad had breathing problems and we brought him to the hospital where the doctors said they had to do a surgery to replace an organ. That's not important. What's important is that when he was home preparing for the surgery in January, we took care of him. My mom went to work and I went to school, but after that we didn't leave his side. My grandma on the other hand came and said she would be staying with us until he is fine and promised to take care of him. But when he started to have difficulty breathing or felt pain, she would just panic, go to the kitchen window and start smoking because it was her way of staying calm, and we need to stay calm in such situations. Unfortunately, my dad passed away mid-surgery and me and my mom couldn't say goodbye, but my grandma immediately took this as an opportunity to take the apartment back for her. 3 months after his passing, she started to come over almost daily and ask my mom where she was. Why was she going to her friend's house? Why she doesn't visit to my dad's grave weekly? And does she even care? This started a trickle of her and my mom having arguments every week, with they always ending with non-side whining. My grandma also started to insult my mom's side of the family more. Says stuff like how my grandpa was terrible at driving and how she has driven twice as long as him, he is older than her by the way, and how my aunt probably doesn't know how to parent her kid. She started picking me up from school since I go to a school that's on the other side of my city. I don't have a problem walking, but she begged me to let her pick me up as well, beginning me to call her daily and come over to her house on weekends. I did that as I felt very bad for her since she was my grandma, but one day I forgot to call her, and on the next day when she was picking me up from school her eyes were almost crying. And she told me how forget she felt and how I insulted her by forgetting about her. I apologized and we didn't speak for 2 days until she picked me up to help her in the garden. She started calling me by my dad's name and I told her I wasn't him. She said she just saw me as him, and now that I'm the man of the house I'm taking his place. I told her that yes, I am doing everything to help, but I'm not him and I don't want to be called that. She just nodded her head and didn't mention it again. More arguing between my mom and grandma happened on a weekly basis and my grandma started getting frustrated. My mom said she saw my grandma poking around the house when she was coming back from work, but my grandma was acting innocent. So my mom bought a camera and placed it in our living room, but we didn't see anything. A month and a half ago I noticed that when I went to help my grandma during the weekends, she would use it as an excuse to talk badly about my mom and her family. Instead of cutting grass or finishing projects my dad left, she would just ask me to do small things and say, let's take a 20-minute break since you're already tired, and during those breaks she would say stuff like how my mom is lying to me, or my grandpa and grandma from my mom's side never bought me anything or picked me up from school. So I slowly started to get annoyed when she would call to pick me up, and I tried politely declining and telling her I don't want to come, but she would just say, oh, but Saturday is the only day with good weather, I'll just pick you up then, and before I respond she hung up. A while ago my mom and my grandpa from her side visited my dad's grave and my grandma was there and started yelling at them about how they didn't visit and how she didn't care. My grandpa was very shocked but wasn't really surprised since he knew her before I was born. and 2 weeks ago we went to fuel up my dad's car which we left with her to keep safe until I can learn how to drive. She made a promise to only drive it a few times just so it doesn't break or anything. I am not a car person. We filled the car up and left her. But right the next day my uncle needed it since it was bigger than his car and he needed to carry a lot of things and he noticed the fuel tank was half empty. My mom got worried where she was taking the car without us knowing but tried ignoring it. Eventually I started to talk back to her and ask her why she thinks those things about my mother and her family, and she told me, "Oh, I'm just telling you what you can see." I started getting annoyed and over the weeks I talked back to her more and more until I told her that I knew she tried to kick my parents out before I was born, and she started trying to crying but couldn't get tears out and praying on the spot saying, "Oh, my dad's name, I failed you, I'm sorry," and then immediately changed her attitude to say that what I heard isn't true, that she isn't a villain and that she just wanted peace. She then took me to my dad's grave and started kissing it and praying to him so I could believe her, but after that the opposite happened. I stopped believing her completely, started trying to ignore her, but it was impossible. She came over unannounced almost daily and asked us if we would be there if she got sick and too old. We didn't give her a straight answer. Last week me, my mom, aunt, uncle, and their kid went on a vacation to a mountain for summer, and we locked the doors to the living room, which is also my mom's room, and my room. They have a different lock so my grandma could only access the hallway, kitchen, and bathroom, but we didn't tell my grandma we were going on vacation. On the second day of our vacation she called telling us she would come over to visit. We told her we weren't home and we were going for a walk, and she asked us why we locked the living room and bedroom. We told her we on a vacation but lied where we were, and she got angry telling us we will have a talk once we return and that she is the only one in the family who wants peace. We then spend the entire vacation worried and not being able to sleep. My mom even cried a few times about how she doesn't feel safe in her home. I got angry and just waited until we got home. I do have to mention that my grandma legally owns a huge portion of the house and my mom has only 13 and I'm still not a legal adult. But all the furniture is ours. My mom and dad renovated the entire place after taking it from my grandma and grandpa, so she can only own walls, or so I was told. A few hours ago when my mom was preparing food, my grandma came with a serious expression and said, "That's it. I'm moving and I will live here now. It's absurd that you lock someone out of their own home." I told her we didn't trust her and that in order for us to finally be at peace she needs to give us her keys to the house and not interact again, but she said we were crazy for thinking we could kick her out of her house. But then I saw that my parents were right about that story. She told me to stay and she would take care of me and my mom can go back to her parents' house. I told her that if she leaves I'm leaving with her, and she said fine as long as you call me and help me out. I told her that ship has sailed and that I don't want to see her again, and she looked at me and said she was incredibly disappointed and my dad would be as well. So I reminded her of how my dad did the same almost 18 years ago before I was born, and she almost started crying. After a while of us going back and forth arguing about everything I already listened, she went to the living room and took her legal documents that said she owned the house. After more arguing she took a cigarette, and before lighting it I took it from her hand because I was annoyed of her constant smoking and I was already going crazy. Once I touched the cigarette she bit my hand like an animal and told me to not touch her stuff. After more arguing she left with the documents. My mom immediately started looking for cheap apartments in our city. She said my grandma is going to take those documents to make sure she legally can kick my mom out. Obviously she doesn't want to kick me out because she said I was her blood and I was my dad. But I told her plenty of times that if my mom goes I will leave with her. I started writing this a while ago and have changed it a bunch of times. I don't know what to do, and it seems the only way for us to be safe is if we live somewhere she doesn't know about. I'll be turning 18 in a year and a half, which is when I'll have a say in the house, but me and my mom can't wait that long. If we buy an appointment we have to take a loan, which my mom says isn't that big of a deal. We have enough money, but I still don't want to leave this house. IDK what to do. If you have any advice that would be great, but even if not, again thank you for taking the time to read this.